Politics, economics and statistics, they all come together when talk turns to inflation. Critics say Australia's obsession with keeping inflation in a comfort zone comes at a cost to those without jobs. The June quarter inflation figures are out tomorrow, but there are questions why the all-important reading isn't delivered monthly. Philip Lasker has been crunching the numbers.
For 20 years in the 70s and 80s, when Australia's inflation rate was regularly above 7%, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke was a major player, first as a union leader for whom the CPI was a fundamental wage bargaining tool, and then as a Prime Minister who developed an accord aimed at keeping a lid on crippling wage rises and inflation.
Without wage restraint, without a smaller budget deficit, without temporarily higher interest rates, we could not have made the progress we have in reforming the Australian economy.
But it was another event in the early 90s which really broke the back of inflation.
This is a recession that Australia had to have.
Since then, the inflation rate has rarely climbed above 4%, and soon after, in 1993, Australia began targeting an average inflation rate between 2 and 3%.
The thinking behind this is that not that zero inflation is best, but that economies function best when inflation is low and stable. And low and stable really means that that people kind of forget about it.
Forgetting about it has meant that the CPI has gradually become a tool for inflation-targeting reserve bankers rather than a straight cost of living index. The cost of a mortgage was removed in 1998 because the CPI would have been pushed higher by the very interest rates that were meant to bring inflation down.
Your mortgage payment is part of your cost of living, it's true, but it is not consumer inflation because it is how you choose to finance your investment good, namely the purchase of a house.
But to Newcastle University's Bill Mitchell, inflation targeting is a straitjacket, forcing policymakers to restrict growth and prevent job creation, leaving unemployment and underemployment higher than it should be.
The inflation targeting regime that we've been in since the early 1990s has really been accompanied by an abandonment of the full employment objective and a promotion of the price stability objective without any real appraisal, in my view, of the costs of doing that.
It's that straitjacket, according to Bill Mitchell, that has the government in pursuit of a totally inappropriate budget surplus.
It's an active target that the policy makers, the Treasurer and the Prime Minister are using to maintain fiscal policy in a more contractionary way, that is suppress total spending, than I think there should be.
Since we've had inflation targeting, unemployment has averaged significantly less than it did in the 20 years before that.
Inflation targeting may be an important part of policy making, but Australia and New Zealand are still the only two OECD countries that do not report on inflation monthly. Certainly the Reserve Bank has called for a more timely readout on the CPI, but the ABS is careful not to take sides.
If we are to maintain the quality of the Australian CPI on a more frequent basis, there's obviously some resource costs that come with that, and that's a decision now that will rest with government.
Monthly data, by their very nature, tend to be more volatile. And it's not clear to me that, well, we probably would be better off with a monthly CPI, but it's not cost-free.
But there are those who argue a monthly number simply gives the screen jockeys more opportunities to place more bets in the casino called the financial markets.